The mower on the right is my old and abused Honda mower, and I've been using it for the last several years. I bought it used, and it was already tired when I bought it. I've always thought it was very fuel efficient, but with the rising gas prices, I'm beginning to wonder if I should change over to something a little bit newer and more fuel efficient. Now, it still runs fine and keep it well maintained, so I don't see it breaking anytime soon. However, I recently picked up this Powersmart mower that's practically brand new, and I thought it'd be nice to know if it's more fuel efficient than my old Honda. Then I started to wonder just how much money I could save if I switched mowers. The only way I'm going to know is to test to see which one has the better fuel economy. In the area I live in, I typically mow about 25 times a year, and my yard is what I would call average in size. I use about 8 gallons of gasoline a year between my mower and the gasoline I mix for my trimmer and blower. Now, the Powersmart mower is much newer, and it's from an overseas company. It doesn't have any redeeming qualities about it, but it only has one mowing season on it, and the engine is a lot smaller at only 170 cc's, so I think it should be pretty good on gas. I've used it several times, and it's always surprised me by how much gasoline it doesn't use when compared to my Honda. To test the fuel efficiency, I'm not going to pour in the same amount of fuel into each tank, and the reason is that I want to see the fuel being used while it's running. The other reason is that from a video perspective, that wouldn't be very interesting. So instead, I'm going to come up with a small fuel tank that both of them will use. The last time I used the Honda, I ran it out of fuel in preparation for this test, but if I did have some fuel in the tank, I would drain what I could out of it and then run the engine until it was dry. An extremely dirty air filter would also affect the results because it would cause more fuel to be drawn into the engine. Now, this one is kind of dirty, but it's not as bad as it could be. When I last serviced the Powersmart mower, I also cleaned and lightly oiled the foam filters. Now, they don't look new, but they look better than the first time I saw them. Unfortunately, the tank still has some fuel in it. That means we're going to have to drain it and the carb. The reason I'm not going to run the mower until it stops is because I want both of them to start in the same condition, which in this case is a cold start. I'm just going to siphon off all the fuel I can get to from the tank, and once I've done that, I'll then remove the drain bolt on the bowl, and that'll leave the fuel system completely empty, just like in the Honda. Now, these are the same steps I would take when I put my mowers up for the winter. So this is the crude fuel tank I made for the test. I didn't want the test to run for 30 or 40 minutes, so that means the tank has to be small. In this case, I only intend on using about 8 ounces for each run. I really wasn't sure if that was going to be enough, but I think it's a good place to start. The tank has a small port at the bottom along with the fuel shutoff valve, so I can fill the tank without filling the carb with fuel until I was ready. I made the tank using an empty stable bottle because of its size and low profile. The next thing I did was to drill a pilot hole at the bottom, followed by a step drill. To install the fitting, I was considering some sort of glue, but I opted to try and tap the plastic bottom instead. This was rather risky because the plastic is rather thin. After that was done, I then tried to install a fitting, and to my surprise, it seemed to be working. The only way I could be sure that it wasn't going to leak was to put fuel into the tank and watch for any leaks. I put a line on the port and then ran the line into the top, that way I didn't have to plug the line. After pouring some stale fuel into the tank, I waited for several minutes, but I didn't see any fuel leaking from it. I then removed the sticker so we could see the fuel better and then mounted it onto a piece of 2x4. Now, before I start the test, I need to make sure there's no fuel in the carb, and to do that, I'm going to try and start it. Once I'm sure there's no fuel in the system, I'm going to remove the fuel line from the carb and then install the fuel line from the test tank. I'll then pour about 8 ounces of fuel into the tank and then carefully add more until it's close to the mark for 8 ounces. Now, I'm going to replace the cap so I don't lose it, but I'm not going to tighten it, otherwise that could affect how the air vents into the tank and affect how quickly the fuel will leave the tank and alter the results. I'll then open the fuel valve, give it a few seconds for the fuel to get to the carb, then I'll prime the engine and then start it. The timer will start when the engine starts running. Now, I'm not going to make this video an hour long, so I'm going to speed it up a little bit. I know it looks like the fuel is already 1.5 ounces lower than it should be, but that's because when I opened the fuel valve, the fuel left the tank, filled the line and the carb bowl. I didn't realize it until the first time it happened, so when I test the Honda, I'll show you this happening. I also need to apologize for the stand moving around. I need to make the base a little bit wider, and it happened to be a very windy day. I also might add a small amount of 2-stroke oil to the fuel to make it easier to see. Now, as the test gets close to the end, you'll notice a terrible design flaw when it comes to the fitting I installed. Since I threaded the fitting into the tank, it's not flush with the bottom of the tank, so all the fuel cannot leave the tank. If I had to guess, I think there's about 3/4 of an ounce left in it when the mower stops running. To keep things consistent between all the mowers, I have to keep using this setup for each and every mower I test, otherwise the results may be different. Now it's almost down to the bottom, so I'm going to put the video back to normal speed. So it looks like it ran for 14 minutes and 29 seconds, and since I don't have any data from any other mowers, I'm not sure how that compares, but I think it's a pretty decent time. If we look at the tank, you can see the amount of fuel that's not able to leave the tank. Since it happened on the first mower, I have to make sure this happens every time for all the mowers. There is one problem though. Since the tank has to gravity feed into the carb and part of the line was below the carb, it seems there's still some fuel in that part of the line. To be fair, I need to put that line above the carb and let that fuel get into the carb, then I'll restart it and see if it runs any longer, and I'll also restart the timer where it left off. So it looks like the mower was able to run for 15 minutes on all the fuel that was able to leave the tank. Now, did the mower actually use 8 ounces of fuel? No, I don't think so. If I had to guess, it probably used about 7¼ ounces of fuel, but the test will be ran the same way for each and every mower, so it will be consistent. The next thing to do is to remove the fuel line from the carb and reconnect the other fuel line to it and then move on to the Honda. Now, I know the fuel tank is empty, but I need to confirm that it won't start. Now that I know that it won't start because there's no fuel in it, we just need to remove the fuel line and connect the line from the test tank, fill up the tank, and then I'll show you what happens once the fuel valve is opened. Now this time I'm going to run the line so that part of the line is not below the carb, so we don't have a replay of what happened on the last mower. Once the fuel tank is full, I'll then open the valve and some of the fuel will then leave the tank and fill the rest of the fuel system. It's still the same amount, it's just being displaced, and as long as I do it the same way for each mower, it will be consistent. Once I know the carb is full of fuel, I'll then start the mower and start the timer. The biggest difference, if you didn't hear it, is that the mower has a lever that works the throttle and choke, and I hate to say it, but this is a huge advantage when it comes to fuel economy. The reason is that the engine speed isn't set, it's variable, and you get to choose if you want to go slower or faster. So why would you want to be able to change the engine speed? Well, there might be a time when you're cutting thin grass and you don't need all that power. That means you can throttle it back and save on fuel. The same goes for when you're cutting tall grass and you need all that power. You can then increase the engine speed to its max, which you may not need all the time. Unfortunately, the option is not available on most residential mowers, and it's often seen on commercial grade mowers instead, so I find it incredibly useful to have that feature on this mower. If I ever get time, I wouldn't mind fitting a newer engine with a throttle lever, that way I can have the ability to control the engine speed. Now, most people wouldn't understand, but I think it'd be worth it. We're coming close to the same time as the Powersmart mower, and it looks like we're at the bottom of the fuel tank, and I think this one's going to be a close call. Unfortunately, the time to beat is 15 minutes, and that time has already passed by, so it looks like the Honda's won, but I wonder how much longer it's going to run for. So it looks like the Honda ran longer on the fuel that came from the tank, and with a time of 18 minutes and 2 seconds, it won by a huge margin. The difference in time is roughly 20%, which doesn't sound too bad, but if you think about it, that means the Powersmart mower has the possibility to cost you 20% more money in fuel, whether that's one season or its entire lifetime. Now, I really thought the newer mower was going to win. The environmental standards have tightened up over the years, so I thought they would have made this mower more fuel efficient, but I guess I was wrong. I really couldn't tell you why the newer mower didn't run as long as I thought it was going to, but I have a guess as to why the Honda won. I think the throttle control was the part that gave the Honda an edge. After choking the carb, I then have to move the lever to the run position, but there's a good chance this engine is running slower than it's supposed to be, and that's probably the reason why it lasted longer. So the results are the Powersmart ran for a total of 15 minutes on roughly 8 ounces of fuel, while the Honda lasted 20% longer at 18 minutes. I don't know about you, but I wouldn't want to pay $300 for a Powersmart mower, and it cost me more in fuel than if I bought a used Honda for $60. It's pretty obvious that I'm going to keep my Honda and more than likely sell the other one. I hate to say it, but I kind of enjoyed testing these mowers. In fact, I like it so much, I think I'm going to do another one. This time, I'm going to test out a John Deere mower with a Briggs Intech engine, which is an overhead valve engine. I heard some bad things about this engine, and that's a real shame, but I wonder how it stacks up when compared to the Honda or even the overseas Powersmart mower. Now, the Briggs says it's a 189cc engine, which is very close to the Honda, which is a 186cc engine. I really thought the Powersmart was going to win because its engine was a lot smaller at only 170cc's, but I guess it didn't help. At this point, you should know the drill. Check to see if there's any fuel in the tank, and if not, disconnect the fuel line from the carb and connect the line from the test tank. Then make sure the line does not hang below the carb. After that, fill the tank to full, then open the valve. Once the fuel stops filling the fuel system, we can try and start it. I didn't show it, but the air filter was also clean. Now, we only have data from 2 mowers at this point, so I really couldn't guess as to how long this one's going to last. I do have high hopes for it, though, because of its design, so I think it'll last longer than the overseas mower. Now, this mower is much older than the Powersmart, but that may not play a huge role when it comes to fuel efficiency, at least based on the Honda mower, which is old and very worn out. Now, I know some of you might be asking about the self-propel system and how I plan on incorporating that into the fuel testing, and the answer is I'm not going to. The fuel efficiency is going to be greatly affected by the drive system because it'll put a huge load on the engine. To be fair, I'd have to hang this tank like a banana bag on the mower and actually mow with it. I just don't think I can keep all the variables the same while doing an actual mowing test, and the biggest variable would be me. By the end of the test, I'll be tired and most likely walk slower and drag the mower down as compared to the first mower, so I think this test will be the most valid. So the time to beat for the Honda was 18 minutes, and it didn't get anywhere near that, and unfortunately, it didn't even beat the Powersmart. Its time was 14 minutes and 35 seconds, which is kind of surprising. It's not a terrible time, but I was hoping that it would at least beat the Powersmart mower. Now, the good part is that the John Deere is not mine, so it's going to go back to its owner, and I don't have to worry about what to do with it. So right now, I'm still glad to know that my old Honda is going to save me money in the long run when compared to other mowers I've tested so far. Now, is this information going to keep me from buying or using a Powersmart mower or any mower with a Briggs overhead valve engine? Of course not. I'll use whatever I need to just to cut my yard, but it'll give me an idea of where some of my money is going. I found this testing to be very eye-opening, and I can't wait to test more mowers because, let's be honest, I have quite a lot of them sitting around waiting to be used, sold, or even given back to their owners. I hope you come back for the next installment because those results will be even more surprising. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.